So this is my cousin James, the only person I know whose ego surpasses his knowledge. Uh, Obviously, I'm kidding, but James actually, he does have his own YouTube channel called Zygal Studios as well, if you want to go ahead and shamelessly plug your channel, James.
Yeah, so if you're interested in anything retro video games or embedded systems related, electrical engineering type stuff, feel free to follow me on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter.
Alright, so, now, we've both been to college, but James studied a little bit differently than I did, and is in a completely different field, where success is, let's be honest, a little faster. Much faster. So, first off, tell us a little bit about yourself, just like a quick rundown of who you are, what you do, what kind of things, where you kind of work, and why.
Yeah, so, ever since I was younger, I always really enjoyed taking things apart, putting them back together, electronics, stuff like that. So I've kind of gravitated towards electrical engineering as something I was interested in. And when I was in high school, I took courses that were, like calculus, physics, and things like that, and started to realize that there was a lot of beauty in stuff like that and stuff I was interested in. So I decided to pursue that in university, and I went to Western Michigan University, which I also currently go for a master's part-time, and I work for a Fortune 500 company as an embedded systems engineer, and I design products that are on very specialized hardware, very, tight restraints, things like that. It's very close, software that's very close to the hardware, so it's very closely tied to my electrical engineering background. So that's a little bit about me.
So, without getting too complicated to, melt the brain of us simple folk like me, what exactly does your job entail on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so on a day-to-day basis, I like to tell people, so people think since I'm a software engineer, I code all day. That's not really the case. If you get into the field, you realize that coding is really only about 40 to 50% of your job.
So then what you're saying is you do nothing?
Not exactly. You just do other things than coding. So a lot of it is coding, but a lot of it's design. There's a lot of figuring out how things fit together. There's also a lot of just interacting with other disciplines of engineering. So you typically will work with mechanical and electrical engineers, so you have to design products with them. So in order to do that smoothly, you have to communicate and talk together, and sometimes communicating them across technical lines isn't always the easiest thing. So we do a lot of inter-team communication and planning to make sure that we get the stuff done on time. So usually on a day-to-day basis, it's a mix between meetings about design, actual technical work. We do research for stuff that's forthcoming in the next product line. And just planning, figuring out how everything's going to fit on a timeline and things like that. And then there's also other things we do too, like networking throughout the company. You can get to know people throughout the company. So that's usually how it is on a day-to-day. It's a mix between technical work and interpersonal type communication stuff.
So essentially, you're kind of like a problem solver in a way.
That's exactly it. That's actually what I tell people is that as an engineer, you don't code. You're pretty much hired to solve problems. You're a professional problem solver. That's exactly right.
That's okay. That's I think that problem solving. I'm going to keep it simple for my channel because my channel is more of a finance channel. So I'm going to speak in terms that not necessarily people who are more enveloped in your engineering world would understand, because even I don't understand all of it. But I think being a problem solver like that is probably an important job, right? Like, it's probably one of the most important.
I like to think that everybody in the world has a very important place with their job, and it's true because the world goes around for that reason. But I do think, so I wouldn't say one's more important than the other. Let's say my job's more important. But what I will say is that having a problem-solving job certainly helps me in my day-to-day life. It becomes easier to think through things, even basic stuff like, how am I going to get breakfast for myself? It sounds silly, but am I going to make it in the morning? Am I going to get it out? Stuff like that.
Or are you going to have a bird fly it to you, right?
There you go. Yeah. So, or better yet, like planning stuff. So whether it's finance is certainly one thing I go to the nth degree with, and we're going to get into that, I think.
We will.
Yeah, so finance is certainly one of those areas where it's very problem-solving oriented, or even just like planning a party for, let's say a family member. There's a lot of things that just, it's easier for me to think through than previously when I didn't have that background in education, or if I don't do it every day. It's easier for me to solve just the basic problems of everyday life. So I think that's an inherent advantage that I have, luckily, because of my job, is it takes less effort for me to solve problems than it did before. So that's at least something I picked up.
Okay. So now we're going to get a little more deeper into what the topic of the video is actually about, which is investing in yourself as a person, especially in education. Because a lot of people think, especially going through YouTube, going through the internet, a lot of people think that, sure, it's not really a necessity to invest in education. You can certainly get a job and a career where you don't need that higher education. And a lot of those jobs are important, too.
Right.
Blue-collar workers, they're important. But some people may think that, it's not an important thing at all, and they don't need it, so why should they even want it? So, my first question to you would be, what was it like for you in college, and why did you even decide that it was right for you?
So, deciding that it was right was primarily something I looked at before college even started. So my parents didn't really push college on me. They said, you need to find something to do with your life to support yourself. So if that was going into a trade for, like if I was a union pipe fitter, for example, or, someone who did construction or carpentry,
Yeah.
I think my parents would have been totally fine with that. However, the thing that I looked at was what do I want to do? And I was very lucky in the sense that my interests and some of my skills aligned with what I actually wanted to go into. So that's kind of how I got started along those lines. Like I said, I'm very lucky in the sense that what I love to do is what I happen to do for a living and what I was able to pursue at university. And I think the second part of what you asked was how it helped, right? Going through the process?
What it was like for you in college. So I guess that's part of the question. That's actually part of the question then. So yeah.
Okay. So, so what was it like for me in college? It was different, weird, and stressful. I think those are three adjectives I can use to describe
They go hand in hand.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I found typically was any new experience in life is odd. It's different, and that's
of
good
course,
because it stresses your tolerance for the most basic things and makes you grow into a better person usually. And I think the experience was very. I don't want to say hard or arduous, but it was like the professors would try and beat you down, basically. They would give a lecture on material that was complicated in and of itself, stuff I didn't really know what it was. We would have some materials to look over, and then come exam time, sometimes you'd look at the exam and say, is this even the same class? And more often than not, the averages of those exams were in the 30s and 40s of percent. I mean, and they would have to
Really?
curve usually. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, like, when you get back an exam result, it says, like, 55%. You're like, crap, I failed. Sometimes that's a B or an A. But
really?
That's just that's part of the process of engineering school is a lot of classes just try and beat you down, and that's more in the early portion of it. Later on, it becomes a little bit more seminarial, that's the wrong word. It's more like a seminar, I should say.
Would you say that beating down was helpful, though?
It was, and that's what I was getting at, was how it helped. But essentially, that's kind of what it was like at first. It was just me learning how to deal with stress, and me learning how to basically be able to balance 4 to 5 of these classes at a time, and still perform at an acceptable level. Because basically, if you don't get a 3.0 in engineering, your job opportunities are going to start to shrink when you get out of school. So that was another thing, is you have to keep yourself above this 3.0 GPA bar usually, and you also have to figure out how to manage all these classes at once. And that was a bit of a challenge at first, but towards my 3rd and 4th year, I started to cope with stress a little bit better. I started to. The biggest thing was I learned how. I learned how I learned. I know that sounds weird, but I figured out how I was best able to retain information the quickest, and I kind of tailored my study habits toward that. And eventually, I applied that to everything I did, whether it was learning how to, I don't know, frame a wall to build a house or, something along those lines. I eventually applied that logic and those habits to how I did. And that's even at my job. I use the same techniques I do, when I was studying and how to learn. So that's kind of what it was like for me. I was basically learning about myself. And this is something I know a lot of people typically who don't go to college will say that college is. I've heard college is not necessarily a good benefit, and there's some
I've heard
validity
that too.
to that in some cases. Yeah, but what I will say is that no matter what you study, you'll learn a lot about yourself. And to me, that's the most valuable thing you can take out of university is it's not the content you learn. So it doesn't matter if it directly relates to your career in the future, because let's be honest, any career, even the stuff I learned in college, is only really 20 to 30% applicable to my actual job now. I mean, that's just the reality of it. The majority of what I learned at university is how I learn, and I learned what my mental tolerances are and how to grow that. And that's really the most important thing you're investing in my opinion, in education, is figuring out about yourself and also realizing that you can do a lot more than you think you can. So that's kind of what it was like for me. It was a giant learning experience about myself.
I actually couldn't agree more, because a lot of people don't realize that when you ship yourself off to college, or even your parents ship you off to college, because some parents aren't as nice and they force their kids into college, right? You learn a lot about yourself because you're on your own. There's no one there to keep you on track.
Absolutely. And that is something I left out. That's a very good point. You're your own accountability partner. There's nobody in your ear telling you, hey, you need to study for the test tomorrow. Hey, you need to do this project on time. It's all on you. And I think the biggest thing is feeling that burden yourself is challenging for some people. And it was for me a little bit at first too, but then I realized, I only have this shot if I I don't know. Responsibility is burdened differently in different people, but it definitely hit me pretty quick. My first semester, it was like, this is on me. This is something that I'm getting involved with.
Yeah, because unless you're the kids of William H. Macy and God, whatever his wife's name is, I can't remember the name. I'm gonna edit it into this video when I figure out her name.
Talking about Lori Loughlin?
Yeah, Lori Loughlin, who they paid to get their kids into college. Yeah, them. So you kind of seem to already answer this with your answer for the last question. But so then you would say that college was a good investment for you, right?
Yeah, I believe it was, and it primarily just because of how much you learn about yourself. Now, I will say this. You can't just expect to go in there and have everybody figure everything out for you about yourself. Your education is only going to give you out what you put into it. So if you put more effort into it and make more observations about yourself, you're going to learn more. It's just that simple. So if you're going to give, half-hearted efforts, then you're probably not going to learn much more than you already know. If you're going to try your hardest and dig deep and figure out really what you're made of, then, you're going to learn a lot more. That's just the fact of it. So paying for college alone and going there is not going to give you all the answers. You need to find them. But the things it does offer you is the opportunity to do so. It gives you the tools, the resources, and it kind of forces you with a little bit of accountability in terms of grades and, deadlines and stuff like that. So during that process, you have to find it yourself along the way and how you learn. But just remember, it's not going to be given to you. You can just show up and not do anything, and it's worthless, and you've wasted money. So that's my take on it, is you get in what you put out. So that's the only thing I'd add, I think, to my answer on that.
Speaking of wasting money, that brings us to the next question. Because the biggest thing on people's minds when thinking about higher education is the cost. And there's big debates on whether is there a difference between college, university, and even community college. I would say yes, that there is. There is definitely a difference, depending, of course, on which school you go to. But how much of a financial burden was it for you?
It was. My parents did help me a little bit with school, but it was a pretty big burden. I mean, it's tens of thousands of dollars. So here's another thing. I was very lucky in the sense that Western Michigan, which is where I went to school, at the time offered this opportunity to get in-state tuition for out-of-state residents if they lived in the state of Michigan for 1 year, for 12 months. So basically, I had to pay an out-of-state tuition rate for the first year, but I stayed the summer, got a job there, and was able to get the in-state tuition for the rest of my years. So it cut
That's
basically
a nice setup.
It is. It's fantastic. And unfortunately, they got rid of it after COVID, probably financially, right? Financial reasons. But they did offer that, and I took advantage of it. That was something my high school counselor actually offered. I said I was interested in engineering, and she said, take a look at Western Michigan. You can go away to school and still get in-state rates after a year. So that dramatically dropped my cost of tuition. It cut it in half, basically, by it was like 45%. So my levels of debt were a lot less than, say, a typical, like if I were to go to Stanford, for example, I'd be a lot more in debt than I would be now going to Western.
Yeah.
It's just, it's that simple. So not only was I fortunate enough to have my parents help me a bit, but I was also able to get internships during a couple summers of my job. So I was able to pay for, a couple years of my school that way as well. But my rates were a lot cheaper because I was in state and there was cheap housing in the Kalamazoo area. It's another thing. Kalamazoo area, we're talking like, a few $100 a month for rent is what I paid with roommates. So, I mean, I was in a very, very lucky situation, at least I think. And was all of this calculated? No. The only thing that was really calculated on my end was the overhead I saw with in-state tuition. That was it. I didn't really think through, what the cost of living was or anything like that. That just kind of happened. So.
Yeah, I don't think most people do calculate the cost of living.
No, usually they don't until they actually have to do it themselves.
And then they go, "Oh crap, I got more."
yeah, exactly.
Because so when I went to college, unfortunately, my parents weren't able to help me, and that's not a dig or anything. My mom is a very hard worker. She always has been, as a single mother, raising me and working full time, and trying to go to school full time as well, to get her master's. Right, and so, but the enormous cost of college and then living on your own, because I had to dorm because I went to college out of state. I went to Columbia College Chicago, and that is the cost of that school was something else. I'm in debt a little over $100,000. So, and it should easily be able to be paid off now that I was able to catch up after COVID. That was one good thing with COVID for me. I was able to catch up and save some money and invest it into where about 3/4 of my debt is going to be paid off by the time the 0% interest rate stops at the end of January. So that's really helpful for me. I've made some good investments that have helped me take out that enormous cost that I sometimes felt was a bad decision. But if you can figure out a way to do it, and you're able to, for most people, you're able to find that job right out of school. It was just a crappy situation when it came to COVID for me. Because for you people, I graduated college the month before COVID hit. So, couldn't find anything.
That's what we talked about, the difference of success in fields. I don't know if maybe it's success, but opportunity. Even engineering graduates at that time were having tremendous troubles finding jobs because companies just weren't opening headcount. Right. Because of the financial burden. It was like across the board, that was probably the worst year in the century to graduate college and to find a job.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it was a tough, even 6 months, I would say, up to that point.
Yeah. So now you have this great job, right? And you have a great wife, and you've recently enrolled in classes again. You wanted to go back and you wanted to get a master's degree, and you wanted to further that investment in yourself. What made you want to do that, especially now, years later?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I'll preface this by saying pretty much everything is driven by my curiosity. am interested in the field I'm going into. In this case, I'm getting a master's in computer engineering, so it's more tailored towards my job. But I've become enthralled with the field, and I want to be able to contribute through academic research and also further my knowledge and expertise in this area. Partially because I'm just really curious about how stuff works in that realm. I want to understand things better. I want to know how they operate, so I can not only do my job better, but it's more of a personal mission, I guess, to understand how things work much more comprehensively. And partially this is because my employer pays for my tuition, so I'm very lucky in that sense too.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, 100% tuition reimbursement up to a certain amount. So I'm able to do this while I work. I go to school part-time and work full-time. So I'm able to do this at, nighttime, a class at a time to benefit, in that sense. So I think the reason I did this was the risk was really low financially. I have all my costs, covered. Granted, I get above a certain grade. If I get a B or above, everything's covered.
Right.
And also because the real reason why is my drive and curiosity behind how things work is very high, and I really want to understand how things work. So between my curiosity and my I guess yearning for more understanding and the low risk, it was kind of a no-brainer basically for me at that point. And even if I had to pay for it, since it's just a class at a time, I'd probably be willing to bear the financial strain of that to further it more. And it's just really because I'm curious and I'm interested and I want to be able to contribute more than I am now. So that's now, I think the one thing I will caution people with on this is maybe in some jobs your position could potentially be limited by your education, so you might need a master's degree to go further. For me, that's not really the case. So it's purely based, you want to do it for the right reasons is what I'm saying. If you're doing it for a title, and if you're doing it to try and get more money, I mean, would it work? In some cases, absolutely. But in my opinion, those are the wrong reasons. You should do it because you really enjoy it. Because if you're doing it just for money, and this goes for a job too, if you're taking a job just for the money, you're going to be pretty miserable. At least that's the way I think. You kind of have to enjoy at least something about it. And that's the same principle with, getting a master's degree. If there's a job that you really want to do and it requires it, that's fine. But if you're trying to get more pay at your job by getting a master's degree, that's usually not going to fly very well. And at that point, you probably shouldn't be getting a master's degree. You should be focusing more of your time on your actual job, because that will get you farther than if you get a master's degree, usually speaking. So that's the only thing I'll caution about. But hopefully that answered the question.
More than answered the question. You actually kind of answered the next couple questions in that answer. So, but what do you hope to achieve by receiving a master's degree? And I know you said you did it because you're curious, right? And you want to further your education because you want to know things, you want to know more, and you want to have that knowledge. But what do you hope to achieve in a professional level with it?
A more comprehensive understanding of my job. My current the current state of embedded systems is changing very rapidly. So having another perspective, an academic perspective on things, might provide me better insight. So basically, to be able to do my job better is certainly one thing I want to achieve by it. But another thing is potentially pursuing a PhD in the future part-time as well. And obviously you could go straight to a PhD, but getting a master's before a PhD is usually the progressive step. That's, I'd say, a secondary aspect of it is I still want to have my options open to be able to pursue a PhD at some point if I would like to.
So then how important would you say? Like, would you say that you wouldn't be where you are today? Obviously, you wouldn't have the job you have today because you need that knowledge in order to do so. But as a person, personally, do you think you'd be where you are today without having gone to college?
That's a very hard question to answer. I'll try my best, but personally, it depends on what I would have gotten involved with, I think, other than college. Do I think my problem-solving skills would be as good? No, definitely not. Do I think I would have grown more as a person? Potentially, depending on, what I got involved with. But I don't think I think in terms of the resources I had to change myself, that alone tells me that since I went to college, and it gave me the opportunities earlier, maybe than, for example, some other career that I would have chosen. I may have figured these things out later, or I might have gotten these opportunities later in my life, but since I was able to get the resources in front of me and at a rapid pace, I was able to figure things out faster. So do I think I'd be a different person? Yeah. Do I think I'd be any better or any worse? I'm not really sure. Maybe I'd be a little bit worse off in some cases, but that's a very hard question to answer for me because I can't really pinpoint. But to me, there's no flat yes or no answer. But I do think that if I got involved with something that I was very passionate about, I think I would have grown just as much. In terms of the opportunities I've gotten financially, engineering is a very lucrative early on type of career. I don't know if I'd be able to find something, unless I got really lucky, another field that wouldn't require a college education, that I'd be able to accomplish everything that I have now. Because 4 years offset versus, say, like working right away, there's even after 4 years of apprenticeship or something as a carpenter, it's hard to compare the timelines of. They would be pretty close, but I still think I'd be hopefully out ahead a little bit. Maybe a better investment for. Maybe I'm rationalizing a bit, but so I think. Am I happy I went to university? Absolutely, but I can't really say I'd be better off without it. Potentially, yes. It depends on what I'd get involved with.
Okay. And that kind of segues into the next question. In a position such as yours, how much do you make a year? And you don't have to give like an exact number if you're not comfortable with it. You can give a range because I know it's not really anyone's business. But like a range, what is it?
Well, okay, so when I started, typically a starting engineer, okay, so in my area of the world, a typical starting engineer salary, design engineer salary is between $60,000 and $70,000 a year. Okay, so when I was out of school, I was making around that much. Now I'm substantially more than that. I'm between $80,000 and $90,000 a year, and this is I just hit my 4-year mark of anniversary for graduating college.
Oh, congrats!
Thank you. Yeah, so it was for my undergraduate. So that's about where I'm at now, and it's kind of across most companies in the Midwest. That's what you'll typically find. If I'm a senior engineer now, so senior engineers typically make around that much money across the board. That's what you can usually kind of expect. Now, if you're out in the West Coast, you can expect probably double that. So I think the average starting. I've heard numbers before, but right out of college at Google, if you're a software engineer, you can make about $175,000 a year. However, cost of living out in Mountain View and Silicon Valley is vastly different than, say, someplace over in the Midwest here.
Yeah, I guess out here that would be more like
per month.
Right. That would be more like a salary of $90 a year out here.
Yeah, exactly. It would come out to about the same, right?
Yeah.
So it's done that way for a reason. I mean, companies aren't going to pay more than they want to, or what other companies are offering comparatively, because otherwise they would be throwing money away in that sense. At least that's kind of how it's viewed. So,
okay. Now, from that amount of money that you make, how much do you invest in any kind of holdings, stock market, crypto, anything that's a monetary investment?
So typically, I try to invest at least 11% of my salary. So I treat my salary as if it's 11 to 15% less. It kind of flexes depending on financial need and whatnot. But essentially, I try and do about 15%, we'll say, of my salary, whether that is my 401k or some other portfolio-based investments that I have, or a Roth IRA, something like that. That's typically what I'll do, is I'll treat my salary as it's 15% less than what it actually is. And that's kind of what my standard is. But so about 15% of my salary, roughly.
Okay. And do you have a typical brokerage account where you trade yourself?
I do, but it's a lot smaller than my, I guess, advised portfolios.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
and we can talk about views on financial advisors and stuff like that, but yeah, it's a lot less because it's more of a hobby than an actual way of making money for me.
Right. Um, so then from that, how did you learn about getting into investing in the market? Mainly, especially independently, so more so your brokerage account. Did you do it yourself, or do you leave it up to the discretion of maybe your financial advisor that handles your retirement? How did you get in?
Well, so I do not have a financial advisor that handles my retirement. I do have a group that does and offers advice.
Work, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now it's how I learned myself was actually through college. I took a class called engineering economy, and the professor I had has won numerous awards for teaching, which is unusual in engineering school, research-based engineering school. But he not only taught us how capital expenditures are done through companies like buying and selling equipment, correctly calculating things for timelines and projects from either whether it's electrical components or pieces of machinery. I learned about the tax system, how each of the tax brackets work, how each of the there's different types of like depreciation recapture or capture, for example, which is odd. But anyway, if I wanted to estimate how much it would take, let's say, a nuclear power plant to be demolished and all the taxes to assess through all that, that's what I kind of learned in that class was the tools in order for me to figure that out. What he also what he also
We had classes there.
it was very practical. And what he also, and this was required for the engineering curriculum, at least for the state of Michigan, in order to get funding for the university, you need to have some type of engineering economy course across all disciplines of engineering. But this professor just kind of went above and beyond. And then apart from that, he would give us quizzes on the Wall Street Journal. So one of the requirements of the course was we had to purchase a student monthly subscription to the Wall Street Journal, and we had to read it every week. And he would give us quizzes on it. And he would also give us financial advice. One of our projects was to do retirement planning ourselves in an Excel spreadsheet with this extension called Crystal Ball from Oracle. So we did simulations on inflation, growth of salary, things like that to give a realistic expectation of if I put X amount of money away and things start growing, that's kind of, we had those tools available. And he also gave us financial advice in terms of just how to read things and understand them better. So I think one of the biggest things I took away from that was typically if you're trying to play in stocks that are short-term gain, you're on the wrong side of chance. There's a famous study done by Princeton that's quoted a lot. Basically, what they tried to do, in a nutshell, this isn't the exact, I'm paraphrasing the study, of course, but what they did, ideally, was had a monkey throw darts at stocks and compared the monkey's picks to the top firms on Wall Street that people give their money to in order to make the money. And over I can't remember how many year period it was, the monkey outperformed the experts in the field. So the way I look at it is, if I'm trying to make a short-term gain, like day trade or something like that, the effort required on my end is enormous, and the chances of it paying out for me are very small. So my philosophy is I try and ride the ebbs and flows of the market, meaning I invest in a lot lower risk things that give me maybe a smaller rate of return up front, but over time it compounds and gets larger. So things like, ETFs and stuff like that, that's much lower risk for the most part for me, or investing in things that grow slowly over time, kind of a loser's game approach, and are less prone to drop during times of financial crisis because people need their goods and services during that time regardless, is typically what my financial investment strategy is more of a loser's game type perspective. If I were in the winner's game mindset, I'd try and hit a home run off of any new up and coming stock, or maybe I'd try and put a decent amount of money to short some stock or something like that, but that's just not something I want to do. So that's something I learned from that course was you're much better off, and you can build a lot of wealth, a good amount of wealth, just by riding the ebbs and flows of the market rather than trying to game it yourself. Because chances are, people a lot smarter than you, and that's the way I looked at it. People a lot smarter than me, if they can't figure it out, I probably can't either. You might get lucky, which is great. If you want to take your chances, you go right ahead. But what my strategy is, that I've learned from that course, is to kind of ride the market and not try and invest too much in any one area, diversify. So believe it or not, I learned a lot about that in that course, and that was one of the most useful courses I learned in school, because it wasn't just about calculating tax depreciation on engineering equipment and capital expenditure report analysis. It was actually about personal finance as well. So that's where I learned a lot of my trade from, and I kind of blossomed from there. I got interested in it, and I started doing a lot of research myself after that course, and over time it started to build my knowledge up. Now, my knowledge of this is not very big, so I would still consult. If I were looking to move any of my money into something different, I would still probably consult a financial advisor, because they're much better trained than I am to do so. But to do the basics, I think I have the skills to do the very basics of building wealth.
I guess my biggest question is, in your independent portfolio, what is your favorite holding?
Well, I think probably my favorite holding would be the S&P 500, primarily because it's pretty consistent. I mean, I'm a SPY guy, I guess you could say, but that's a primary piece of it. I do have a good amount of stock in my company as well, just because I think that the work I'm doing, I wouldn't say motivates me a little bit more, but because, my personal contributions to the company have probably virtually no effect on the stock, let's be real. But I will say that it gives me a sense of confidence in where the company's going. That's kind of, my take on it, at least. But that's pretty minimal. I don't have a whole lot of stock in my company.
Yeah. Okay, and do you hold any cryptocurrencies?
I do have a small amount in crypto, yeah, I do. And it's primarily in Bitcoin. That's pretty much, I'd say, actually, I think right now that's all of my investments in crypto are primarily in Bitcoin. Like I said, it's not a ton of money. It's something.
Right, it's just to join the wave.
The rest of my stuff, it's like, let's say, close to a 60th. Yeah, it's something to play around. It's like close to a 60th of my total wealth.
Yeah, I mean, I have a few thousand in cryptocurrencies. Most of my money, it's all in the stock market, but I like to day trade cryptocurrencies because there's more of a pattern for it to swing violently high and violently low than, of course, the stock market, where there's regulation. So I own a vast variety of cryptocurrencies. Some that I think are going somewhere. Some I just want to take advantage of. So that's how I play with my money. My play money is in the cryptocurrency market, and I kind of treat that like a casino almost. I know it's possible to lose most of that money.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But you can also get lucky. And the biggest thing is if you're willing to take that risk. Because when I talked about day trading earlier, I'm not trying to turn people away from it. What I am saying is that the chances of you making money on it are small. But like I said, you can get lucky. And if you're willing to take that risk, or if you're able to take that risk,
right,
you want to do it. Why not? But I guarantee you, though, if you go to any financial advisor, they'll probably advise.
Oh yeah, my financial advisor. I have someone who handles my retirement stuff, and independently, not through any kind of organization. And he hates that I day trade, especially the crypto market, because he also hates crypto. So he tells me every day, makes fun of me every day for doing it. But at the end of the day, it's my money. In terms of the stock market, I like the S&P. My favorite holding is and you know how much of a simp I am for this company, but my favorite holding is Apple.
Great pick. I mean, if you look over the past 20 years in terms of growth, I think there's very few companies that have even touched Apple. I don't even know if there's...
Yeah, Tesla definitely.
Perhaps, I don't know. Yeah. but Apple is an excellent pick because they're going to be around for a long
Yeah.
time. They're still growing. If you want to have, so it offers a little bit of safety with your money. If you look over time, the rate of return is excellent. So I'd say that's a great pick, regardless if you like the.
Yeah, I mean they're a great pick. And then my second favorite is AbbVie, which I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're a medical company. They make drugs, not those kind of drugs.
Yeah. Yes, which goes along the other portion of my strategy is in Loser's Game is to choose things that regardless of whether or not someone's in a panic or recession,
Exactly.
people will still need pharmaceuticals and they're still willing to pay through the nose for them. So that is a great portion to the strategy. That's kind of what I've money in companies like Pfizer and stuff like that. It's just the way things work, and if you want to take a lower risk approach,
right? And then for broad market, I like to. I know you said you like the S&P 500, which I do have a lot of money in it, but I prefer putting a lot of my money broadly into the Nasdaq.
That too, yeah, I do have a decent.
Yeah, because QQQ is my thing. Because consistently, there's only been a couple things that have been able to beat the S&P, and that is the Nasdaq. So.
That's true.
Yep, that's all of it. So, it was great talking to you, James. Now. No problem. And I'm sure you'll probably be on the channel again for another topic. Once again, this is James from Zygal Studios. I'll probably leave a link in the description for his channel if you want to go check out his channel. James, why don't you give the elevator pitch of what your channel does?
Yeah, so basically what I do is I review esoteric or old hardware, and I break it down from a technical perspective, and I also do just general embedded systems engineering videos. So I offer advice on career. So if you're interested in going to electrical engineering as a whole, I offer advice on that, and to just general engineering projects. I do actual practical projects as well. So that's pretty much what my channel encompasses: old video game hardware analysis.
Yeah, those are the videos I like.
Engineering in general, whether it's career advice.
Those are the videos I like, the ones on the consoles.
They're interesting pieces of hardware because they were designed with tons of effort with very little time, and they kind of get forgotten. So one of my goals is to show how clever they were, but also the technological feat that they were, because they get thrown by the wayside. So I want to kind of preserve history in that sense, whether it's the way developers made a game or whether it's the way company made a console, because they're all very impressive. There's not one console I've looked at that I thought, man, this thing sucks.
Well, as much as I love Apple, why don't you take a look at their gaming console from the 90s and you tell me that you're impressed with it. I think it was called the Pippin, yeah.
The Pippin? If I remember correctly. I haven't reviewed the architecture, but I would assume it was pretty.
Not for the gamer side.
It's a video topic for the future.
All right, and if you wanna, a suggestion from me, I can tell you. Most recently, he did put up a video of an hour-long keynote that he did, and it was actually kind of fascinating. Most people might find it boring, but I would recommend it, especially if you're, into the kind of field that James is in. Hey guys, so I just wanted to let you know that there's no real ending to this video anymore because there was a lot of problems when recording this and when editing this. I don't know what happened. Everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong with this video. My camera died multiple times. And then the audio and the video from James got out of sync so many different times without even moving the files in the editing software. So I don't know what happened with that. But, yeah. So don't forget to smash the like button if you liked this so that more than 10 people can see this video. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to, because I will have more content on the way. And in the comments below, if you liked seeing James on this and you would like to see him talk about more stuff about his field or even investing, then just let me know so I can bring him back on the channel. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next video.